Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Leanne Bryant. I am the Program Integrity Manager here at the National Center on Subsidy Innovation and Accountability, welcoming you all to our error rate training for Year 1 states. Today we're going to be digging into the sampling decisions, assurances, and fieldwork preparation plan, as well as customizing your record review worksheet. I have been watching folks come into the room, seeing that attendee list, which I know you all can see as well, and so happy. I'm smiling as I look at this list of names and see so many familiar faces out there. Just a couple housekeeping notes before we jump in. I did send out the handout of today's deck, as well as the data collection instructions about an hour ago. So everybody who registered should have that email. But also there are handouts available in the handout box of your GoToWebinar dashboard. And we are going to go ahead and jump in here. Here is our dedicated team of error rate specialists at the National Center on Subsidy Innovation and Accountability, and certainly have a great desire here to support each of the states throughout the process. Janae Williams, she is assigned to Region 7 error rate specialist. So on today's call, that would be Kansas. Mike McKenzie, he's assigned to Region 1. And I do see some folks on from New Hampshire and Vermont. Welcome. Katie Watts, our error rate lead. Katie is assigned to all other regions, but she's on leave right now. So for the time being, Mike will be the contact for regions 1 through 5, and Janae 6 through 10. We will put the temporary assignments into the chat box for everyone, but please know we all work very closely here on error rate. So regardless of who you all may reach out to for support, we're going to be sure that you get the help requested. Also with us today from the Office of Child Care's Oversight and Accountability Division, we have Adi Fator and Linda Wining. So welcome to both of you. Linda and Adi will be available if we happen to have some questions come in. And we also have several staff from the regional offices, those regional program managers and program specialists. Thank you for joining us today. But most importantly, all of our Year 1 states. This is a map of all of the states that are in the Year 1 cohort. For some of you who have been around for a while, nothing's changed here. It's the same list of states that are always in Year 1. There's 18 and Puerto Rico. So I'm going to launch a quick poll here. Hopefully technology is working with me today. And let's see how long our attendees have been involved in this process. Is this your very first time going through the error rate review? Maybe your first, second, third, fourth, fifth, or sixth cycle. I'll share with you all that this is my 6th cycle. Between my state experience and TA experience, this is the 6th time I'm going through this process. So lots of experience on this call. I'm seeing second or third. There's still votes coming in, so I'm going to give it a couple more seconds and then I'll close it. Okay, it's looking quiet. So I'm going to close and share. Can you all see the, oh, there it goes. All right, so we can see that the majority of folks, this is your second or third cycle. 24% are new. Great, welcome. Welcome to the error rate process. You can see there about 18%, it's your 4th or 5th, and just a small handful, this is your 6th cycle. So we do have some very experienced folks on the call today. Great. Hopefully, again, technology is my friend today, and I can get this to work seamlessly. Oh, is it? Here it goes. Little delay, little delay. All right, here is the agenda for our time together today. we are going to provide an overview of the error rate review process. And again, I see we've got a lot of newer folks on the line, so feel free to raise your hand if you want to ask us a question. You can do that using the GoToWebinar dashboard. You can also use the chat pod to ask questions of us. So please feel free to interact. Again, if you have questions, comments, raise your hand or type in the chat box. Back to the agenda here. Changes to the data collection instructions. So there have been some revisions to the DCI. So we're going to walk through some of those with you. Then Mike is going to dig into creating the sampling decisions, assurances, and fieldwork preparation plan, also known as the SDAP. And that is a big chunk for me to say, so hopefully I continue to say it correctly this afternoon. And then Janae is going to walk us through customizing the record review worksheet. So how can we make sure that that template or tool for conducting reviews fits the needs of your state policies? And then we will wrap up with next steps. All right, so what is the error rate review? The error rate review is focusing on eligibility errors within your state CCDF programs. Reviewers from the state lead agency are going to examine a random sample of 276 case records for eligibility errors. And then a report is going to be submitted on various measures, the causes of errors and improper payments, and plans to reduce any future errors. Each of the 50 states, plus Puerto Rico and DC, conduct the review once every 3 years on a rotational cycle. There are 3 cohorts of states, and you all are year 1 states. You're going to be reporting on your errors in June of 2023, so next summer. That report is based on case records from October 1, 2021 through September 30th, 2022, which is what we refer to as the review period. So we're currently right in the middle of your review period. We think of 6 steps to completing the error rate process. So the first step is to learn about the process by reading the data collection instructions. The DCI was mailed out to everybody, and it includes templates for the different submissions and instructions for completing the submissions, for sampling the cases, and for conducting reviews. I did mention that the DCI was emailed out. It's also available for download in the handout. Once you have familiarized yourself with the DCI, you'll start planning for your reviews by creating and submitting the sampling decisions, assurances, and fieldwork preparation plan. And we definitely simplify that and call it the SDAP. Mike is going to walk us through the SDAP in much more detail later in the webinar. Then you all will customize the record review worksheet template. This is the tool that you're going to be using to conduct your case record reviews. And Janae is going to walk us through customizations a little bit later. Once the SDAP and record review worksheet have both been created and approved, you'll begin conducting the reviews of the 276 cases. The next step is to report the results of your reviews in a final report, which we call the State Improper Payments Report, or ACF 404. If you happen to have an error rate or percent of improper payments that is greater than 10%, you will be required to create and complete a corrective action plan. But I'm confident none of you on this call will need to do that. Throughout each of these steps, you can receive TA support from NICSIA, And we're going to be holding several more training webinars between now and June of 2023 when you need to submit that report. This slide shows the timeline for the error rate review, including the date for the different submissions. The first line displays the case review period, which I already talked about a little bit. The last day to submit your SDAP is October 31st, 2022, and the last day to submit the customized record review worksheet is December 31st. The final report, the state improper payments report, is submitted on or before June 30, 2023, so next summer. Again, if you happen to need to submit a corrective action plan, that must be submitted within 60 days of the deadline for submitting that state improper payments report. All right, now we are going to move in to the revisions to the data collection instructions. So similar to the CCDF plan preprint, these data collection instructions are revised every 3 years. It was last revised in 2018, and that version expired in December of 2021. OCC began the process of making revisions to the DCI in 2021, and that process includes incorporating feedback from all of you, feedback collected during various state error rate calls throughout the cycle. Following posting on the Federal Register and that public comment period, the DCI was just approved in January of this year and expires in 2025. The newest DCI, I mentioned this already, it was emailed out to everyone, and again, it is available for download in the handouts box. You can also find the DCI at any time out on the Office of Child Care or the CCTN or TA website. And we'll throw some links into the chat box showing you all where those websites are. And of course, you can always request the DCI from your regional office or your error rate specialist. Just one more note here. I do just want to be perfectly clear, especially since I know we have folks on the call that have been through this error rate review process 3 years ago. The DCI that you may have referenced in the last cycle is now expired. As you're gearing up for reviews, be sure you're referencing the DCI dated January of 2022. Okay, so what changed in the DCI? For those that participated in the last cycle, there really are not any significant changes here. So hopefully that makes folks happy. So let's start here with the SDAP. Just one change to this submission. A new question has been added to request information about how the lead agency reviewers go about accessing documents stored by other entities. So let's use TANF as an example. If child care eligibility is determined by the TANF agency, the eligibility process, including any supporting documentation, that's included in the error rate review. In order for the reviewers to complete the review, they're going to need to have access to the record and eligibility documentation maintained by the TANF agency. We will get into that a little bit more later. In the RRW, there is one change to the template. Element 350 is now titled Qualifying Provider Arrangement. If you remember, it used to be Qualifying Care and Provider Arrangement. And the boilerplate text has also been updated to match the title. Flexibility has been added to the additional inquiry process. So during the record review, the reviewer can now consider information gathered through the AI process to determine whether the case was ultimately eligible for services. And that's even if the original eligibility worker had access to that same resource. I think that this is a really nice change, and we will definitely drill down into this one a bit more, sharing some examples in a future webinar. Moving into the ACF 404, that's the report that's due in June after your reviews are complete. Item number 17 has been updated to offer some additional instructions for states that do not apply the pooling factor to all of the sampled cases. And we'll dig into that one a little bit more later. Finally, the 405, or the Corrective Action Plan. The official title of the CAP has changed just a little bit, and it was changed to align with the DCI and the 404 title. So the 405 is now called the State Improper Payments Corrective Action Plan. Two of the items here were also updated. Item 1 is all about the improper payment rate, and that was revised to add some clarity for everyone. Item number 3 is the table representing actions to reduce improper payment errors. That item was also updated to allow states to list the root causes of their improper payment errors. I also just want to add that throughout the data collection instructions, there were a lot of additional examples included. I think that will really be helpful for folks to see those examples right in the DCI. Next up is to start digging into creating the SDAP, but I'm going to go ahead and just pause for a minute here. I don't see any questions. I don't see any hands raised. Just give it a second here, see if anything comes in. No questions so far? Okay, Mike, I'm turning it over to you.
All right, thanks so much, Leanne. We're going to get right into discussing how you create your SDAP, folks. And again, if you have questions, just put it in the chat box there and stop us anytime as we go along here, okay? Real informal. As we mentioned a few slides back, or Leanne did, the SDAP contains your plans for sampling cases and conducting reviews. It's completed using a template, and you can find that template in the DCI, but just keep in mind that you actually have to submit your SDAP using the Online Data Collection System, or OLDC. This is the same website that's used to submit the ACF 404 report. And you can refer to the OLDC handout that we've included today for more info on accessing and navigating through OLDC. Remember, you can't begin sampling cases until the SDAP's been approved by the regional office. However, you can begin working on the record review worksheet and submit that before the SDAP's been approved. Now, sometimes the lead agency will submit the SDAP and the RRW at the same time, and that's perfectly fine also. The SDAP and this overview consists of 3 parts: sampling decisions, assurances, and your fieldwork preparation plan. We're going to go through each of the parts and each item today, starting with part 1, sampling decisions. The first items in part 1 of the SDAP involve the selection of cases and replacement cases. So you'll see here in the piece that's highlighted, it states that you will select 276 cases, and then it's blank where you insert your number of monthly replacement cases. This is the number of replacement cases you will select per month, not annually. This can be confusing sometimes because we ask you for the annual number of cases in the main sample, or 276. So you may think that you need to do the same thing for replacement cases, but that's not the case. We're actually looking for a monthly figure here. You must choose at least 3 cases per month, but you do have the option to choose more than that. Then click on the box to agree that you will obtain approval from the regional office before using any of your replacement cases. Next, clearly describe your procedures for collecting samples, including the sample of replacement cases. Now we're looking for some level of detail here, and Chapter 4 of the DCI can really help you with creating this response. One thing we do ask that you are really clear about is that the replacement cases will be drawn separately from the main sample. One B asks for the source of your random number generator. This is pretty self-explanatory, as many lead agencies use the RAND function of Excel, or a function within your database software, or even a website that can generate a random number. Again, there's much more detail on attaining this random number in Chapter 4 of the DCI. One C includes several items about the frequency of monthly sampling frames and projected start dates. So first, select your frequency for collecting monthly sampling frames. This isn't how often you will be conducting reviews, but how you will be sampling the cases. Remember, if you select other, you'll need to describe your plan in a comments box that will appear as a result of checking the other box. Then moving down, you'll give your projected started dates for sampling and for starting your reviews. You don't have to give us a specific date like March 18th, 2022, but please give us at least the month. So in this case, you would say March 2022. And another reminder that regardless of what date is listed here, again, remember, sampling cannot begin until the SDAP's been approved, and the reviews cannot begin until the record review worksheet has been approved. Part 2 of the SDAP is the assurances section. I'm not going to read through all of this now, but we do ask that you read it before you click on the box to agree. Lead agencies are ultimately responsible for compliance with these assurances, so it's important that you understand them before you click yes to your agreement. All right, let's move on to part 3, the preparation plan. The first set of items, 3A, involves identifying the project leadership. So first, give the names, job titles, and roles of the leadership team. To be clear, this is only asking for those who you consider to be part of the project leadership, not everybody who will be involved in the review. So share what their roles will be in the process and click the box to show that you agree with the statement that the leaders understand the program and to ensure that the timelines will be met. Moving on to the next item, give the name and job title for the person who will certify and submit the ACF 404 or the improper payments report when you're done. Something to keep in mind here is that the report is submitted in June. The deadline's June 30th. We already talked about that. And so if we ask you to make any changes to your report after our review, you may need to submit it in July. So I mention this because people from the leadership team often go on summer vacation in June or July, and you want to make sure that somebody is around to actually certify the report. We will usually only see one name given for this item, but it's okay to give 2 or 3 names if you want to indicate that more than one person will have the ability to certify and submit the final report. So this kind of gives you that backup in case somebody's out during those months of June and July. And hopefully this year, with the pandemic easing, people can go on vacation again. All right, 3B covers information about your review team composition. This refers to only those who will be actually conducting the case reviews. You don't need to give names here, but please describe where the reviewers come from, like the unit name of where they're located, and how many will be doing first versus second level reviews. Three C, inter-reviewer consistency. We recommend a re-review of all cases with improper payment errors, and at least some of those other cases as well. Remember, if you check the group discussion, please be specific about how these discussions will contribute to inter-reviewer consistency. Three D deals with error definitions, and we're going to spend a little bit of time on this to make sure everybody understands what we're looking for. This piece can be a little challenging. The SSTAT actually asked for 3 different error definitions. First, we ask for a general definition that encompasses all errors. Next, you'll provide a definition for improper payment errors. In other words, eligibility errors that result in an improper payment. And finally, you'll provide a definition for non-payment or administrative errors, or the eligibility errors that do not result in an improper payment. Okay, good error definitions. So provided a few good examples of a general error definition. I'm not going to read each of these, but hopefully you can read them on your own and they can help you with writing your own general definitions of error. The important thing here is that these are all encompassing and they refer to any eligibility error during your review process, regardless of whether the error results in an improper payment or not. So I'm going to give you just a minute to take a look at these. Leanne, I'm having a little bit of technical difficulties with moving the slide deck forward.
Sorry about that, Mike. I was trying to type a chat message in and it took powers away from you. Your powers are regranted.
Right. Am I back on? There we go.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I want to take a moment to give some examples of general error definitions that might not be so good. So let's read the first example here. An error refers to a misapplication of law, regulation, or policy governing the administration of CCDF grant funds that result in an improper payment to the provider. So why isn't this a good definition? Because it states that the error results in an improper payment, which by definition then makes it not a good general error definition. Second example. Any violation or misapplication of child care policies, rules, and procedures, including eligibility errors, errors in payment processing, and intentional program violations from the parent or provider. So this example is a little more general. but it's still not a good definition because it includes some things that are not under the scope of this review. This review only involves eligibility errors and not errors in payment processing or intentional program violations. In this slide, we move on to good examples of the second definition related to improper payment errors. I'm going to let you read these examples on your own. One thing you will read in each of these is that they specifically refer to an improper payment or overpayments and underpayments. If you have any questions, folks, this would be a good time to put them in the chat box too. All right, sticking with improper payment errors, in this slide, I'll show you some examples of definitions that would not work for us. So first, we read the first one: a violation or misapplication of policy or procedure governing the child care program that results in an incorrect authorization to the child care provider. So why isn't this a good definition from our standpoint? Because of that word authorization on the last line. We're interested here in incorrect payments, not just authorizations. If that word was changed to payment, then this would actually be an acceptable definition. Next one, an improper payment error refers to any payment that should not have been made, or a payment that was made in the incorrect amount due to miscalculation of income, miscalculation of cost share amount, or missing documentation. So in this definition, the state gave examples of what causes an improper payment, which is fine to do. But this reads as if those are the only things that would lead to an improper payment. If you don't want to give examples of error causes in your definition, be clear that they are just examples and not an exhaustive list. You could say something like including but not limited to before listing your causes. Another thing that's wrong with this definition is that by including missing documentation, it suggests that every instance of missing documentation would result in an improper payment, and that's not usually the case. Finally, this slide shows some examples of good definitions for non-payment or administrative errors. The important thing in each of these good definitions is that they specify that the error does not result in a change in the payment or an improper payment. Let's give you just a second to take a look at these. And as we've done with the other examples, here's one example of an admin error or non-payment error definition that we feel would not be so good. So let's read it first. Any violation or misapplication of law, regulation, or policy governing the administration of CCDF grant funds, regardless of whether such a violation results in an improper payment. So why isn't this a good definition for administrative error? This would actually be a great general error definition, but it's not clear that it's referring to errors that do not result in an improper payment. All right, so enough about error definitions for now, and back to the next part of the SSTAT. 3E asks for your plans for reviewing your state policies and processes. First, describe your plan to ensure that the customization of your record review worksheet will use state policy in effect during the sample month. Make sure you consider whether there were or will be any policy changes during the review period. And if so, this is where you want to reference those. Next, describe your plan to ensure that all reviewers will consistently interpret error. You might want to say something here about how this will be built into your reviewer training as well. You can also think about your plans for ensuring ongoing inter-reviewer reliability as you described in section 3B of the SDAP as we discussed earlier. Now, this is the piece on pooling that's been updated a little bit to provide more clarity on the pooling factor. And this asks you to describe how you will identify whether to apply a pooling factor and how you will determine what that pooling factor will be on the state final improper payments report. This is not a yes or no item. Rather, we want you to share who you will consult with for information about the pooling factor. Is there a specific person or unit that provides this information? What do you know about the pooling factor already? For example, what funds are in the pool? Now, if you know for sure that you don't have a pooling factor in your state, again, share how you know this information. So again, the instructions have been clarified a little bit, but we just want to let you know what we're looking for here. In 3F, we ask about your IT project responsibilities. There's a list of tasks here, and you should check off all of the tasks that you will accomplish in partnership with IT system staff. If there's anything else you would like to highlight, check the other tasks and describe it there. Now, if any of the boxes above others are not checked, then you will describe how and by whom those tasks will be accomplished in this box. In the last part of 3F, describe your process to determine the annual amount of payments. This refers to all of the CCDF payments that are made for all children over the sample period. So we would like you to share how you will get this figure. Do you get it from a particular person or unit, or how will you pull it from a system, etc.? All right, last part of the SDAP is 3G related to case review logistics. This section asks you to share your logistical details, including whether the reviewers will be examining physical or electronic records and how the records are handled. And then we talked about this, or I should say Leanne talked about this before, a little bit of a change here, little additional information on how the lead agency accesses needed documents that may be stored by other entities, like a separate TANF agency, like we talked about before. And finally, where do the reviews take place? On site, centrally, regionally. I know that's really changed in the last couple of years, so we want you to describe that and tell us how the review files will be organized and maintained. Sorry, I went too far. Technical difficulty there. Let me go back one more. So the main thing that I want to convey here is just please make sure that all of these components are included in your response for 3G. I'm going to stop for just a second, see if we have any questions or comments.
Mike, this is Leanne. I'm only seeing one question that has come in thus far. Nancy had a question related to submitting the record review worksheet, and that was when you were talking about the SDAP submittal. I think Janae is going to get into this for us, but real quick, Nancy, the record review worksheet is submitted via email to the regional office.
Great, thank you, Leanne.
Oh, actually, Mike, we have one more question.
Okay.
Anne's asking, is the SDAP a template that we will get? So, and the template is in the data collection instructions. It is an attachment, so you can pull it right from the handouts, or the DCI was emailed out earlier today. The template is in the DCI, so you can use that the PDF. You're welcome.
All right, good deal. So that concludes our overview of the SDAP, folks. Thanks for hanging in there with me through my technical difficulties. Now, Janae Williams is going to cover the record review worksheet component of this process. I'm going to turn it over to you, Janae.
All right, thank you, Mike. Looks like another question came in. Leanne, do you want to address that question?
Sure. So Tammy's asking, since all the forms are so specific to what you're looking for, could you provide templates for all the forms to the state so they can customize for their own state? So if I'm understanding the question correctly, Tammy, the record review worksheet template and the SDAP and the 404, all of those templates are in the DCI. If you're referring to the record review worksheet, Janae is going to get into that here in the next part of the webinar, but there are templates for each of these submissions. And again, they're in the DCI.
Perfect. Thank you, Leanne.
You're welcome.
All right. So now in this section of the webinar, we will move on into the next step of the error rate process, which is customizing the record review worksheet. So the record review worksheet, or the RRW, provides a standardized worksheet to assess the case record to determine whether eligibility was determined correctly and whether there was an improper payment. The RRW consists of a series of elements, each of which deals with different areas of eligibility. Each element contains 4 columns, which have a specific purpose. One note we will say is that in element 500, there are only 2 columns, and the record review worksheet is a template, parts of which cannot be changed and parts of which are customized by the lead agencies to conform to their own state policies and procedures, so that your reviews are based on your own policies and procedures. Now, went too far, sorry about that. As a reminder, all states will have to update their RRW even if they haven't made changes since the last cycle. In addition to the small boilerplate tweaks and the PRA language and expiration dates, those are also changes in the new template. All right, so here are a few notes regarding the RRW. So agencies can utilize a variety of formats to conduct their reviews within their record review worksheets. For example, agencies can use Excel, Access, an online database, or paper or pencil. And all of these are acceptable, but you must be able to provide a printed version of the record review worksheet that matches the template as found in the DCI. Your customized record review worksheet is submitted directly to your program specialist in the regional office. It is not submitted in the OLDC. And you cannot begin reviews until the record review worksheet has been approved. And as mentioned a few slides ago, certain portions of the RRW are customized. And that's kind of what we'll focus on in this portion of the webinar. So when creating your RRW, make sure you do not remove anything from the template, with the exception of the NA that appears in columns 2 and 3 of each element. In column 1 of elements 100 through 410 under the boilerplate, The agency can add policy citations or other requirements for the reviewers to consider when assessing the case record. In addition, in elements 100 through 410, agencies will customize column 2 by adding items that your reviewers will complete while analyzing the case record. A small note here, do not customize anything in columns 3 or 4. Do not customize anything in the mid-table or element 500, the case summary. All right, so some general tips for customizing your record review worksheet. First, focus on what we call front-end eligibility errors. We're interested in what happened during eligibility or redetermination. So do not include items for analyzing that took place following that, such as what we call back-end processes, such as payment processing, attendance, and so on. One exception to this is that we do look at payment in element 410, and we'll discuss element 410 a bit in a few moments. The next tip is not to include any items where the reviewer will be asked to record personally identifiable information of clients, children, or providers, and this includes names, birth dates, addresses, workplace names, or provider license or provider numbers that can be tracked back to the provider or traced back to the provider. If it's an internal provider number, then that's fine to include, but if it's something that anyone could just Google or do a search on the agency's website and it's tied back to the provider, then it would be considered personally identifiable information. Okay, so now I'm going to show examples of customizing the record review worksheet. And as I go through these, keep in mind that these are just examples, and your own agency's customization will look different, and it's based on your policy and specific eligibility criteria. So let's start with element 100. This slide shows the template for element 100 with no customization. On the top, you can see the 4 headers, which should not be changed. And to the left corner in the column, the first column, you can see the boilerplate. Now here you do not remove or change anything in the boilerplate. Also, as a quick note, is when you're creating your record review worksheet, make sure you're working off the most recent version of the record review worksheet template. Sometimes agencies like to work off their old RRW from like 3 years ago, and that's fine to use as a starting point. However, there are some changes to things like the boilerplate, the mid-table was added, element 500 was added, and so on. So just make a note and make sure that your submission matches not just the template, but the current template. All right. So still looking at element 100, column 1 under the boilerplate, here's where you would add your policy citations and other requirements. Make sure that all applicable components from the boilerplate are included here. Now you can see in this example, the state has the agency has added a policy citation for applications, assets, and certificate. We're going to stick with element 100 and move to the next part of customizing, which is in column 2. All right, so again, here you would add items to assist the reviewers in conducting a detailed analysis of the case record, like column 1. Be sure that everything from the elements boilerplate that is applicable to your agency is included. You can see in this example, at the top, the lead agency has added an item asking whether there was a signed application on file in the case file, an item on eligibility notification, an item on asset declarations, and an item on the child care certificate. Again, this will look different at your agency, but hopefully this gives you an idea of what the customization might look like. And a couple other things to note in column 2. You can see that for the assets item, there is an NA box. We like to see NA boxes included when there are yes or no items. And this is just in case the item is not applicable to all scenarios, which in some cases it might not be. Also, a note of the inclusion of the comments box here. While this isn't a requirement, we do very highly recommend that comments boxes are included in column 2 for each element. All right, so let's take a quick look at column 3. And again, like I said a few minutes ago, column 3 is not actually customized, so you should not, add any text here. However, you are allowed to add a field, especially if you're working in Microsoft Word, a field for reviewers to enter in responses. We find that that's fine. Just the important thing is that it prints out blank. All right, so finally, let's take a look at column 4. And again, here you should not add or edit anything with one exception. You can add a response field for each of the listed questions for the boilerplate, or from the boilerplate, sorry. All right, so let's look at some column 1 and column 2 customization examples from a couple of more elements. Now here is element 200, which deals with priority group placement. Let's take a quick look at the boilerplate. And here it reads, determine whether the client met the criteria of any state designated priority group, e.g. special needs or low income. And I wanted to talk about this element because it's one of the ones that we see does not apply to many states. Many states do not have a waiting list, so the priority group is not something that they look at or look for during eligibility. And if this is the case in your lead agency, you still do have to customize column 1. Okay, so for example, you could include any policies that you do have about priorities or waiting lists or wait lists, even if you do not have an active wait list. All right, and for column 2 of element 200, it's the same thing. If the element does not apply in your state, we ask that you still add a customization here, simply including a note. You do not have a wait list during the review period or sample month would suffice. All right, so another important item to remember when creating column 1 in your record review worksheet is that if any policies, and I think Leanne and Mike mentioned this earlier, if any policies or processes change during the review period, even if they were only temporary, you want to include those changes in column 1. All right, so if policy changes did occur, you also want to ensure that the column 2 reflects the policy changes and provides an opportunity for the reviewer to review those specific policy or process changes according to the eligibility determination. And if applicable, it's best to include dates of the policy effective date and the process and the date the process or policy ended. All right, so if you compared, and Leanne talked about this earlier, if you compared the current worksheet to the past cycle worksheet, you will notice that the title of element 350 has changed, and the current title is qualifying provider arrangement. So be sure to update this on your current record review worksheet. All right. And finally, I wanted to give an example of element 410. So looking at the boilerplate in element 410 is where the reviewer compares the subsidy amount that they calculated to the subsidy amount authorized by the eligibility worker. If there is a discrepancy, then they need to examine the payment amount to determine whether there was an improper payment. So you want to be sure you customize column 1 just as previous elements. You want to work on the record review. If you worked on the record review worksheet of previous cycles, this wasn't a requirement. And I think a few years ago, it was something that you could do, but you didn't have to. So now it is a requirement. So please add policies and any other instructions for reviewers on calculating authorizations, calculating payments, or determining improper payments. All right. So in column 2 of 410, we are really looking for a few specific things here. So more so than the previous elements where there was a lot more flexibility for agencies in customizations, we need to see a place record for the eligibility worker's subsidy amount, the reviewer's subsidy amount. There should be a place record to record the difference if there is one, and a place to record the sample month payment amount, and if there's a difference between the two subsidy amounts. And also the comments box is also good to include here. Some lead agencies do like to add other things here, which is perfectly fine. But this is what we want to see at a minimum. So, but sometimes lead agencies also include information on whether it was an overpayment or an underpayment, or they include additional items on calculating the subsidy amount. Also, a quick thing here to note is for column 4 of element 410, again, you do not customize column 4, but I just wanted to point out that in the template, column 4 is a bit different from the previous elements. And there are only 2 items, whereas the other elements, there is also an item 2A. So be sure that when you're creating your record review worksheet, that this matches the template. And just again, a friendly reminder, as mentioned earlier, columns 3 and 4 are not customized. The mid-table and element 500 is not customized. So I will stop here before we go to what's next and see if we have any questions in the chat box that we can address.
Thank you, Janae. This is Leanne again. Yep, it looks like Lily had a question when you were talking through column 3. You indicated that it was important that when it prints out blank. Can you give an example? So I think what Janae was trying to explain was when you submit the template to OCC for review and approval, there should not be anything in column 3. Once you're completing your record reviews, yes, if you are providing results in column 3, then that is definitely okay. It's whenever you're submitting your template for review and approval, column 3 should be blank. All right, also, Lisa has her hand up. Lisa, your hand has been up for quite some time. I'm sorry about that. I think it went up right when Janae started. So Lisa, if you're still with us, I have unmuted you. Oh, no, I didn't. You're self-muted. Lisa, if you have a question for us, you are not muted on our end, so you can go ahead and ask, or you can type into the chat box. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions come in, but I know this webinar was scheduled for 90 minutes. And as you can see, we're kind of getting ready to wrap up. There have been a couple questions that have come in related to the templates. So if everyone will just bear with me for a second, I'm going to pull up the DCI. Give me 1 second here, please. So I can very quickly try to walk you all through this, especially for those that are a little bit newer. Bear with me, it's loading. Oh, and now it's not responding. That's not helpful. Okay, everyone. Hopefully you can now all see the data collection instructions. Again, we want to make sure that we're always looking at the one dated January of 2022. And the way that my Adobe is set up, I can see the bookmarks over here on the left. I was going to try to get to the table of contents for us, though I can see I'm not doing a good job right now. Here's the table of contents on page 3. So we've got the overview, we have the section on creating the SDAP, generating the cases, customizing the record review worksheet, conducting the reviews, and then we get into, then we get into the 404 and 405. But I think what a lot of you are interested in is these attachments. So attachment 1, I believe this is the SDAP. So this starts on page 85. Next up, attachment 2 is the record review worksheet template. That starts on page 91 of the PDF. And all of the different elements of the record review worksheet are included in this template. Attachment 3 is going to report, and this is submitted in the OLDC, but you have a template here to follow. And then attachment 5 is going to be the corrective action plan. So hopefully that was helpful. We just kind of walk through the DCI a little bit. If at any time anyone has questions, please feel free to reach out to the regional office, reach out to the error rate specialist. We love this material. We are happy to help you all navigate through this process, especially for the folks that are newer out there. So now, if technology is my friend, I'm going to switch back to the slide deck. Any other questions? Or Janae wraps us up.
Well, I think we're ready to go to next. What's next?
Yeah.
Right. And there we go. All right, so a few reminders on what's next for you guys. The last day for submitting your SDAP in OLDC is October 31st, 2022. Little reminder here, sampling cannot begin until it has been approved. The last day to submit your record review worksheet to the regional office is December 31st, 2022. And again, reviews cannot begin until it has been approved. And lastly, here you are encouraged to send your SDAP or your record review worksheet drafts to your NCSIA error rate specialist to review before submitting. This is optional and not required, but encouraged. And it kind of gives you guys, a heads up on anything that may need to be corrected, if anything, prior to your submission. All right, and a few other resources that are available to you guys on the website. Here is the link, and we will put that in the chat box as well. Some of the NCSIA error rate resources on the website include links to past webinars, briefs that are available, the e-learning orientation module for new staff. I did see that there were some new people on the phone, and just other general information on your the error rate process. Okay, and I think that is it. I will turn it back over to you, Leanne, to close us out. And thank you all for being here.
Yes, thank you, Janae. So these are the assignments for each of our error rate specialists. However, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, and I placed in the chat box, Katie Watts is on leave at the moment. So we do have some temporary assignments. Mike McKenzie is covering Region 1, as is his assignment, plus Regions 2 through 5. And Janae is covering Regions 6 through 10. But again, if you're going to send an email, if you send it to any of these three folks, if you send it to me, Leanne, we are definitely going to respond to you. We work very closely together, and we will definitely meet your needs. And also that reminder there, if you do send an email correspondence, please copy your regional office. And I know we are at the end of the slide deck. However, there are a few more questions that have come in, and I'm happy to stick around, answer any more questions. But I see a question: can we get assistance in submitting the SDAP within the OLDC? Absolutely. Your error rate specialist can help to get your login, your credentials set up for you if you don't already have them. Feel free to reach out to your regional office. Your error rate specialist, if you do not already have access to the OLDC, you will need to submit an access request form. There is one of those available for download, but absolutely, we can help you through submitting in the OLDC. We can also review your draft SDAP. For example, maybe you have it in a Word document. We can review it, give you some feedback prior to your submission to the regional office for review, or sorry, into the OLDC for review. Also a question related to the OLDC and the SDAP. Yes, this is a good one, Nancy. So the OLDC has been undergoing some revisions in order to get those SDAP changes into the OLDC. I'll go ahead and open it up for Linda and Adi if you all would like to respond to this one as for a timeline. But I believe, kind of any day now, we expect the OLDC to be able to accept the SDAP submissions. And I'm going to pause.
Sure.
Yeah.
This is Linda. This is Linda Winings. We just had some last-minute glitches with getting the OLDC updates completed, but they're very minor at this point. We expect them to be done very soon, and we will let you know as soon as they are completed.
Thank you, Linda. Okay, any other questions from folks? Or, you're welcome to raise your hand and ask us questions. We do have some additional time, although you all may be happy to get 20 minutes back in your day.
Hi, Leanne. I think Lisa Hollinger has her hand up.
Yes, her hand has been up for quite a while, but when I called on her earlier, I didn't get a response. So
good deal. All right.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not seeing anything else come in. Thanks everybody for joining us this afternoon. And again, always feel free to reach out with any questions. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of the day.
Bye, everybody.